I selected the outline from domain 4 on how do I grow my PLN, and I selected this one because I work at the university and the College of Graduate Studies, and I think this is an important concept because it talks about dealing with building connections and networking, and how would you do that through tools and different types of mediums. So on the outline, how I went about putting this together was I first went and gathered some information about what a PLN was, and the resources to help explain to a teacher or somebody else on what it is and how it is beneficial to them and the importance of it to them. I also went about talking about how tools such as Twitter, conferences, and things of that nature are connected to this because they can serve as the outlet for building these networks. And so one of the things would be to discuss, and I went out and found, how do you create Twitter? How do you build out your profiles, your information? How do you build your followers to build connections? And the importance of building that and building your profile and information. Also provide information on what you do through Twitter when you are following somebody, when you retweet their information, when you like it, what the importance of that is for them and for you in your networking. And so found some quick tips that would be helpful and beneficial, top 10 tips on how to build your Twitter, how to use it with chat purposes as well, other ways to build out your community as you start building that network of professionals that you're linking in. And so that's partially part of this as well, is discussing and providing the links on how do they find their followers by using a hashtag, how they like things and such. But then additionally, outside of Twitter, how they would use it through other activities, how they would build a connection with people they've met at conferences, connect who they've met and add that with Twitter, how they would moderate things through a chat, and how they would just pretty much build on this network of people that they are meeting through these different mediums, whether it's Twitter, it could be LinkedIn. There's so many different options. There's communities that can be used as well. So there's a large amount of ways that people can use their PLN, and we would show some of this in their videos.
Tell me, what was the hardest part of this process? Like when you were looking for things online, what was the hardest part of this process for you?
I think the hardest part was trying to, one, find resources that were easy enough to understand, but also did not overwhelm, because there's so many different instructional websites, videos, things of that nature to explain what each one of these things are. It was trying to narrow it down to something that would be engaging and easy to present on, not wanting to get people lost in lots of information.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I picked an outline from domain number 2, and I picked improving communication between parents and teachers. I feel like in a world where we have access to parents and we have access to teachers. There's always seems to be some disconnect just because of how busy our lives are, or there's things that are happening during the day that we don't always communicate until the next day or a couple of days later. In the outline, one of the first things that I did was just run through the outline and look at each of the Roman numerals and what the sections were related to the outline. So getting started, the best practices, tools to communicate, and then using Class Dojo to communicate behavior, and then online surveys and an online calendar. So once I looked through each of those, I was able to look and see where there might be some areas for duplication, and I condensed some of the information into other sections. For example, Roman numeral number 2 for best practices, it's an overview on what the best practices are when you're communicating with parents. And so I put in here using culturally responsive language. So that's using the language that the families can understand. What I'd like to do is have a graphic to show the difference between using educator language and using language that parents would actually understand. The frequency of communication, I haven't found anything yet related to frequency, but when I talk about the tools later, it will explain more about the frequency. And then having multiple modes of communication, this is going to deal with using apps, but also using calendars and websites. So there was a little bit of duplication there. This is just an overview, but later it could be an actual micro video about the tool itself. And then number 3 was tools to communicate. So one of the tools to communicate is Remind. And there'd be a video to define how you use Remind, how you set it up. Here's a picture of what it looks like. If somebody downloads the app, then they can create a class. They create the class and they can connect it to the school itself. It is a great tool. So this would be part of the script. Remind is a great way for school administrators, teachers, parents, and students to stay in communication. And a couple of examples. So using it to share upcoming deadlines, forms, signing up for field trips, and if you have a child in sports, being able to communicate with the coach about estimated arrival time so you're not waiting in the parking lot. The next thing is Parent Square. This is another way to communicate with parents. This is an app that can be used with a district. And one of the things that I really like that I'll share in a video is the old way of communicating, how things kind of seem all over the place between teachers, school staff. But with Parent Square, it's centralized and information is flowing to and from these different units. So with Parent Square, PTA can communicate with the parents through Parent Square. You don't have to set up a separate account just to communicate with the parents. So I felt that that was really important because parents are really busy. So I want to highlight that. I want to highlight the tools that parents have access to. I think a lot of times we think about the tools teachers have to communicate with parents, but we also need to think about parents wanting to communicate with teachers. So they have sign up list, calendar, RSVP. You can share pictures, file sharing, and there's a direct messaging tool to your teacher as well. Another tool that can be used is designing a classroom website using Google Sites, Weebly, WordPress, or Wix. This could be something that's more public, where a person doesn't necessarily have to download an app to get access to this information. Another tool for improving communication is about communicating behavior. So the previous tools were about communicating information, what's happening within the school or the class. This particular app is to communicate behavior. So a teacher can set up a classroom and they basically design the name, what grade it's for, and then what type of things they want to be able to share. Students are also able to use Class Dojo. They create their own monster in Class Dojo. So it's important for the teacher to set it up in a way that the students see what they want them to see. And then the communicating behavior, this is really great tool because there's behaviors that are on there. So throughout the day, a teacher could just click on the behavior and communicate that to the parent. And it could be good, positive behaviors and areas the students need to work on. So those would be some of the screens. And the script would say something along the lines of, instead of having to wait all day to update parents on their child's behavior or only reaching out for negative behavior, Class Dojo can be used to communicate in real time with parents about their child's behavior throughout the day. So that would be something that would be said in the video. Online surveys are another way to communicate with parents. If you are using an app that has surveys embedded, it makes it easier. But if not, you could have a Google form created, SurveyMonkey. And then calendars, again, using an app that already has a calendar embedded in it, even using Canvas and the calendar that's listed in Canvas. And then identifying a way to set up a calendar and being able to share that publicly with people, which if you set up a Google Calendar, you can put the link and embed that Google Calendar on a website for the class. So that was the process. It was really just going through and seeing what this outline was related to, what the main purpose was, and how I can start to process the standards and the idea of creating micro videos.
So for my project, I decided to go into domain 3 and choose QR codes in the classroom. One of the reasons I chose QR codes in the classroom is in our district, we really use it a lot. When we provide professional development, we use QR codes so teachers can scan it and provide automatic feedback to us. We use it with students as well when we're doing activities or we need them to do a survey or a questionnaire. So when I went into the outline, I started vetting it actually and looking at what's important and what's not as a teacher's perspective. So in a teacher's perspective, it's, okay, why would I use a QR code? Why is it efficient in my class? What am I going to gain and what are the benefits? So I'm still vetting this. I started highlighting and kind of going to the meat of it, which is creating QR codes, why we use them, why are they important, what's the benefit. One of the things I did see is for using KWA, I've never used KWA. I will admit I am going to delete that out because there are other QR code generators that are more user friendly. And so for me, one of them is the QR code generator.com. I've always used this for the longest time since I've been an educator. It's simple. You just put your URL. You can pick what you want to turn into a QR code. So as I'm going through this outline, I'm looking from a teacher's perspective of, okay, what am I going to be giving my teachers as in videos? As my job, I already create videos of where I have to tell students how to do things. Now, how am I going to write a script to tell a teacher why QR codes are beneficial? I'm still vetting this whole outline because I think there's certain things that are relevant to the QR code in the classroom outline. And I think there's certain things that are not relevant in regards to using it. So really looking at how do you share a QR code, really looking at how you can scan it. What I started looking at is also the process of the QR code. I didn't realize that for a long period of time, QR codes were becoming extinct. They were actually becoming dead. That's what we call it. I didn't realize that. So I started looking at why was it dying out? And now why is it coming to be so popular? And it's efficient. So I started looking at different articles. I started looking at the 5 reasons why QR codes are still relevant. And then how you can use it in the classroom. I did notice in the outline, my QR outline, I have using QR codes in general, and then their subjects, which I am just going to condense this because you can touch on how to use it in a subject under the general topic. And then what I want to do is, once I explain that, give you examples of, okay, well, let's think in the classroom, the QR code that you could use it as a scavenger hunt. You could use it as a history project. And then how do we use it in general? Well, maybe you want to get feedback from the students, or maybe you need to just gather some information from the student. So for instance, in our district, one of the things that we do, because we're in COVID, we have students having to scan the QR code and then answer questions regarding COVID to see if they have temperatures or if they're good to be in the classroom or if they're not. And so looking at all of this is basically now looking at, okay, what are the scripts that I'm going to write for the videos and the mini videos that I'm going to allow teachers to really understand how to create a QR code.